So that's, as you're sitting here tonight, what I hope that you will do is you will leave tonight saying, you know what, I can do better. And it doesn't have to all be perfect, right? It's just this week, do one more meal of your own home preparation than what you would have done if you hadn't come to this class. Just one, right? And then in a couple of weeks, try and maybe do a couple more. You know, that sort of thing. It's good health is it takes a commitment, a decision to do this, and it doesn't have to be perfect every time. But just let's start making better and better choices as we go. All right? So in your body, I was thinking about, let's talk a little bit about what the process of this fuel extraction, the ignition of this food, because we're going to spend, and it will cost some money, because I end up going to places like New Seasons, and we get, if we eat meat, we try to get meat that's hormone free and all that good stuff, you know, and when you actually pay $20 for a piece of meat, and you realize I could have had an entire meal at a restaurant for this, right? You understand, you start doing the math and you start going, you mean I still have to cook this thing, but are you going to get healthy or not? And if you have decided that you want to be healthy, then you're going to have to put your money where your mouth is and you're going to do it. Now, what we're finding is, just because it's more expensive doesn't mean it's going to cost more in the long run, right? Because you can buy like these free-range chickens or stuff like this, and you can bake one for a meal, right? And then slice off some of the meat. Karen can take that and have chicken salad the next day, and I can take the carcass and we can boil it and we can make chicken soup that we can have for dinner the next, right? You understand? If we start thinking about this, we can have really good quality meats. We eat lots of vegetables, do the farmer's market during the summer and all that sort of stuff, and try to eat these things. You see what we can do? We can actually have a really incredible experience with eating the food we eat. So the first thing is we've got to stick the food in our pie hole, right? In our face, in our mouth. And we've got to make sure that we chew it well, because if we're going to actually effectively extract the nutrients that's in this food that we're eating, we're spending a lot of money on, and we're putting a lot of time to prepare it, then we've got to make sure we extract it. The last thing we want is to stick it in our food and kind of like a rat in a snake, you know, be like a bolus just sitting there waiting for the digestive enzymes to break it down. It's much better if, while it's in our face, we chew it, we break it down, we start the digestion. In fact, the digestion doesn't just start in your stomach. What starts to break down while it's still in your mouth?
Saliva.
Yeah, because the saliva, and you've got starches are starting to actually break down while it's still in your mouth, and it will squirt it down. Your body, you know how much saliva your body makes every day?
3 liters.
Not quite that many, but the more you think about food, the more it makes. But about what, if you think about a 2-liter bottle, in that range, probably would be the average person. Some might make more, some might make less, okay? But you think about that, that's how much saliva your body makes. So it is kind of, it's a function of your body that the saliva, not only does it moisten all these tissues here, because we've got to keep our food tube nice and moistened, mucus and all that sort of stuff, right? Because we've all had the experience where we have something wrong with a scratchy throat or something, and you feel it as you swallow and it's sore all the way down, right? If eating was like that all the time, that would be a real problem, right? So we have to have the saliva to keep it moist and the mucus and things of that nature. But the saliva actually starts breaking down. So what are the starches? When we say starches, what sorts of foods are those?
Potatoes.
Yes, potatoes, the breads, those sorts of things. All right. The food tube, as far as we know, the food tube really doesn't play much of a role in terms of the ignition or in terms of getting your fuel extracted and utilized. We pretty much think about the food tube as a way to get the food from our face down into our stomach, all right? But just like the appendix and all sorts of things, there actually may be more that is happening in the food tube than we realize. Now, there are a couple conditions where the food tube starts to have trouble. Now, have you ever heard of hiatal hernia?
I've heard of it.
Mm-hmm. Hiatal hernias. So if we think of, so the food has to get down. Now you all know you've got a diaphragm here. And this is our bellows for our breathing, right? Okay, now, but you think about that, well, you go, wait a minute, why did God make my stomach is here, but my lungs are here, and so all the food that I eat has to go through the food tube. You realize there's a slit in your diaphragm through which all the food goes, and then the stomach is down here. Now, a hiatal hernia is when some of the stomach passes up through that slit, makes a bubble right above where the diaphragm is. So this part of your stomach is actually where your lungs are.
Oh, wow.
What do you think these people experience?
Pain.
Yes. And do you realize this is a difficulty breathing, right? And it has pain and gas, heartburn, these types of things. You go, oh my goodness. Have you ever had that adjusted? Okay. Now, remember, you guys picked a crazy chiropractor, right? So we start talking, well, wait a minute, maybe there's a problem. That's a part of your ignition system, right? This is going to affect every choice you make about the food you eat. Because if that's happened to you, that means you can't eat food late at night, which you shouldn't anyway, but it means you've got to eat smaller meals, which you should anyway, right? But one of the things that I find is if I will take and actually pull the stomach back down and pull it so the food tube that is the only thing in that slit and the stomach isn't there anymore, guess what happens? You don't have as much trouble. Do you realize? So these are things that can be done. Now we have, we can do this. Now, you know who I most commonly do this on? Pregnant women. Can you think about it? You got a baby? What does the stomach goes up through the slit? I can't tell you how many ladies can do so much better when they're pregnant. Well, and Harvard, so isn't this interesting? So these are things that we can do. So if you've got a problem though with your ignition system, it's going to cause lots of problems. The ramifications will be quite profound for you then, right? You see? Isn't this interesting? So here we're talking about rocket fuel nutrition, and part of it is we've got to make sure that we're eating better foods, right? And we all know that, but let's make sure that we actually do it. But then when we're eating these foods, what if our body doesn't quite deal with it properly? For instance, now stomach. What is digested in your stomach?
Hydrochloric acid.
Hydrochloric acid is one of the primary components. What does it break down though? Proteins. Proteins. So if you think, in fact, you talked about hydrochloric acid, I love it when people know the right words and can use them in the right places. That was exactly right. The proteins are broken down by the hydrochloric acid. Do you realize that is the only place in your body, in your digestive tract, where it is acidic? So something else has to happen in that environment that if it doesn't happen there, it won't happen effectively. You know what else has to be absorbed? You see, calcium, have you ever heard of that? Mm-hmm. So, we have a problem in our country when we've talked about heartburn. A lot of people have heartburn. What is one of the most common things that they are prescribed by their medical doctors? Well, they're given Tums, right?
Right.
All right, now you don't want to get me started on this because the doctors are having people take Tums because it has calcium. We all need calcium. All right, but what's happening is it's in the form that's an antacid. It's reducing the acid content, and it happens to have calcium there. But it's a terrible form of calcium. So don't even think that you're doing something good for yourself if you're doing things to reduce the stomach acid content. What's happening is you are making your stomach less acidic, so it will have a harder time breaking down proteins, and it won't be able to absorb the calcium as well. People are ending up with osteoporosis and all sorts of problems inadvertently because they're doing things to lower the acid, to make it so it's not as acidic in their stomach. So what we have to do is we have to think God designed you for the stomach to be highly acidic. And it's that way so that you can effectively break down the proteins. Because if you take an antacid so your heartburn doesn't hurt so much, and you eat a protein meal, and it's not as much acid as it needs to break down, that protein is still going to pass through into your small intestines, and what will happen to you then? Yes, and it will start to ferment. And food that's fermenting that should be digesting, what does that give you? Gas. And you're miserable, right? Everybody else. And it's like, well, I don't know what's wrong with you. All you know is that your body you're miserable, you're trying to do everything right, and in spite of your best efforts, it just doesn't quite work right. So one of the things about chiropractic is we get your ignition system, let's get this whole system working again, right? Let's think about it, and let's see how we can, and there are things that you can do. In fact, I would almost suggest if you've already tried the antacid end of things, another idea some people actually do is take extra hydrochloric acid. If you've never tried that, I know it's crazy, I know it. Could I suggest you at least explore that as an idea?